What is up, everybody? We're Rolling Audio here today on episode 65 of The Hodder Show. How are you doing? I hope you have an absolutely fantastic week so far. Thank you so much for tuning in, clicking that play button on this very cool episode of the podcast. I am talking some wrestling, folks, because it has been way too damn long since I feel like I have talked some serious wrestling. I don't remember the last time when it was. I think it was the WWE draft, which was like episode 48, I'm pretty sure, when I talked about it alone anyway. So it's been a while. Today, I am going to talk to you guys about a top 10 list that I've made of my top 10 my personal favorite wrestlers who have either retired from in-ring competition or who have unfortunately passed away. It's a very interesting list. It's a very diverse list. I think it's a list that's going to very much surprise people. There's definitely some names in there that they're going to be like, really? Like, wow, interesting. Especially if you are a real diehard true wrestling fan, there's definitely some names that you're going to enjoy. There's one pretty controversial pick. There's one very obvious pick. I think there's something for everybody, folks. So I really hope you guys enjoy it. Very excited for you guys to hear it. I can't believe I'm on episode 65 right now. I really can. It's pretty crazy, the fact that I've been doing this now for almost a year. Not quite a year yet. Another few months it'll be a year, but we're still going. We're still doing our thing, folks. As we continue to build the brand of the Hodder Show together, folks, I could not do this without you. I know I have some very diehard listeners, so thank you guys very much. I am getting ready to thinking about doing another t-shirt order. I'm going to do it a little differently this time. I'm going to only order them if I have a certain amount of pre-orders, and I need all of the money up front. Last time I did the t-shirt order, it was great. I was so happy with how it turned out, but just this time around, I got to make sure I'm a little smarter, I guess, and with the way I do it. So, but I'm definitely thinking about it. I already have a couple people who have already said they want to do a pre-order. So definitely let me know if you guys want to pre-order for some t-shirts. It's going to be the exact same shirt, but the pricing might be a little different. I haven't finalized the details yet, but just if you guys are interested, if there's anyone listening who didn't get a t-shirt the first time around who wants one, be sure to let me know. You guys probably saw on the other day that I put a picture of myself, my wonderful girlfriend Sam, and her friend Kendall. We all went out just to get something to eat or whatever the hell, and we all had our Hodder Show t-shirts on, so that was very cool. We looked like a cult walking around, the cult of Hodder, ladies and gentlemen. So definitely that's very cool. Be sure to let me know if you would like a t-shirt, and I'm going to actually just cut this intro here right now. I got a lot of ground to cover on my list. I don't want to take up any more time, so let's get into it. Alright, so today, as I mentioned, we are talking about, I am talking about my top 10 favorite wrestlers who have either retired from in-ring competition or unfortunately have passed away. Now, this was a very interesting list to make for very obvious reasons. There are so many people I wanted to have on this list. Either just because I feel they should be on it. I feel that people are going to be like, oh, how could you not have this person on and have this person on? And you know what? That's fine. This is all strictly a matter of personally, some people that I think deserve recognition in my eyes. People who I just strictly love or loved, I guess, as a child or whatever. This isn't necessarily who I think are the top 10 greatest of all time or anything at all of that caliber. It's just who I personally think are great and who are some of my favorites and that kind of thing. So that's kind of what this list is going to be. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to give the name of the person. I'm going to give a little bit of actual factual background as far as kind of who they were and some title reign information, just that kind of thing. Just kind of, I guess, in a way, back up from an on paper standpoint as to why I feel they deserve to be on my list here. Again, because it is a personal list, I don't necessarily need a reason But I'm just kind of going to try and give one. Hopefully, if people disagree with who's on the list, maybe I can convince them otherwise. But I'm more doing this just because, like I said in the intro, I wanted to talk some wrestling. And I think this is a really cool list I kind of made up here. So we're gonna have some facts. I'm gonna maybe tell some stories as to why I personally love this person, and we're just gonna see what happens here, guys. I think it's a pretty cool, diverse list. Of course, there's some all-time greats on here. I mean, just looking at my list again here, I mean, damn, there is really some great people on here. Couple people I want to kind of give an honorable mention to before I go who are not on this list. Number one is Shawn Michaels. The reason Shawn Michaels is not on this list for me personally is just because I don't feel that we have seen Shawn Michaels' last match. And I can't shake that feeling. So I didn't feel right putting him on this list just because it's like, and he retired, like his retirement is still so fresh for me that it's like, I can't bring myself to do it. He definitely deserves to be on this list. He's probably the greatest professional wrestler of all time. Let's be honest. But that is why he's not on this list. And someone like Stone Cold Steve Austin, I feel it's kind of cliche to put on the list. I love Stone Cold Steve Austin. I have always loved Stone Cold Steve Austin. He'd probably number 11 for me if I did a top 20. But this is a top 10. It was really tricky to do this, but I kind of wanted to focus on people more who I personally really enjoy and who I don't think really get enough mention. Especially some of the older, kind of old school talents I talk about. Some people might go, what the hell, seriously? But that's just that. Like I said, there's so many names I would love to mention on this list, but the first name, starting off at number 10, that I know is probably going to make some people go, huh, is, he was one of the all-time greatest professional wrestlers of all times, and there is no denying that, and that is the Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers. Now, Buddy Rogers, he was one of the biggest wrestling stars in the beginning of the television era. His performances inspired generations of professional wrestlers, such as guys like Butch Reed, Nature Boy Ric Flair. Of course, obviously, he adopted his name and his look and attitude and finishing hold and that kind of thing. Even people nowadays like The Miz talk about how, I can't remember, there was some kind of a special, I think it was like the top 100 greatest wrestlers of all time, and The Miz was talking about how much he loved Buddy Rogers and Nick Bockwinkel, who is another man who I should probably give a quick honorable mention to. Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was definitely a great professional wrestler. He was a 2-time world champion, holding both the top titles in the NWA and the WWF, known today obviously as the WWE. He was actually the inaugural WWF champion, and he's one of the only 3 men in history to hold both the NWA and the WWE title. Both those other two guys being Ric Flair and the phenomenal one AJ Styles, my favorite current wrestler, but we will get to that another day. He's widely viewed as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. If you ask a lot of the old school wrestlers, his name would come up a lot for sure. Like I mentioned, there was this list WWE did. It was like a special DVD list, and it was the top 100 greatest wrestlers of all time. And I can't remember where Buddy Rogers placed, but he was up there, having names like the Fabulous Moolah saying he was the greatest wrestler of all time. Among other, Ric Flair, so many other guys. His arrogance and the way he talked. The first time I ever saw Buddy Rogers, he had a match. It was black and white, and it was a matchup. I cannot remember who he was against, and I tried to find this match, and I actually couldn't, because I would have loved to have watched this match again. Because all I remember from the match, I remember the end, because he locked in the figure 4. Which he was, of course, the innovator of. Probably one of the greatest finishing moves as far as a submission standpoint is concerned, if not the greatest finishing move of all time. But after the match, he cut a little bit of a promo. And what I remember most about this is the fact that he's cutting this promo when he's talking about how he's so great, and when it comes to the wrestling business, there's nobody better. And I can't remember exactly what the interviewee said. He's like, oh, like, you certainly have a, I think it was like an arrogance about you. He was just like, why wouldn't I? Blah, 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 blah. When God made me, he threw away the mold when it comes to the wrestling business. And it was just great. And I remember thinking, like, man, what a dick. And that's why the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was so great, because not only was he one of the first real true heels, obviously there were bad guys and heels before him, but he had that Nature Boy strut. He'd come off the ropes and do his little strut, and it was just great. I love watching his matches still to this day. And anytime I get to watch a Nature Boy Buddy Rogers match, I always enjoy it, even though he might be a little quote-unquote old school and quote-unquote boring for some people nowadays. I think that you're crazy if you think that, because he really was a truly amazing performer. I mean, ask the Nature Boy Ric Flair and he'll tell you. But either way, of course, I did miss watching his matches live and him in his prime. Of course, unfortunately, he passed away before I even knew what wrestling was in 1992. But either way, if you've never, for some reason, seen the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers perform, I highly recommend it. He had great matches with everybody. You basically can't go wrong. Just type in the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers on friggin' YouTube, and something will pop up. Maybe my buddy over at Respect the Mat podcast, Mr. Greg might have a good match for you. I'll have to tag him in this. Maybe he can send me a good Buddy Rogers match. But so that was my number 10, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Moving on to number 9, we have another kind of old school performer here, another guy who I think is tragically overlooked in this day and age, and that happens with time. Obviously, I mean, sitting here talking about, I'm talking about Buddy Rogers, who, if you ask any modern wrestling fan who Buddy Rogers is, probably I'm going to say 8 out of 10 of them aren't going to know who he is. They'll say the Nature Boy. Oh, that's Ric Flair. And that's okay. You can't be mad at people for not knowing some of the pioneers of the business. But this guy not only was he definitely a pioneer, but I think he's one of the most important names in the wrestling business for so many different reasons. And that is Pat Patterson, who is my number 9 pick for this list. Now, Pat Patterson, obviously, he was the first WWE Intercontinental Champion. Obviously, it wasn't called the WWE back then, but obviously, I did not get to see Pat Patterson in his prime again because I was not alive. But anytime I get to watch one of his older matches, I always am floored. I love watching him work. It doesn't matter what he was doing. It doesn't matter if he was doing a match where he was kind of a little bit playing a little bit of a heel, or he was playing a baby. It didn't matter. He always did amazing work. Obviously, he's known by modern fans as kind of Vince's right hand. He's still employed by the WWE as a creative consultant. Hey, he does a pretty damn good job at it, guys. You hear so many people. I know Jericho talks about it all the time on his podcast, how he's just widely regarded as one of the greatest people and one of the greatest minds in the wrestling business. People like Jericho, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, they all give him so much credit for helping their careers along. Especially The Rock. You hear The Rock talk about Pat Patterson, how he would always come to Pat and be like, "Hey Pat, here's my idea. What do you think?" And then of course he'd go, "Oh well, how about you do this?" I don't know what accent that was. I tried to do a French accent, didn't work. But even more modern guys, like someone like Kevin Owens, talks about Pat Patterson all the time. Anytime he's been on Talk of Jericho, he talks about Pat Patterson, and he's widely regarded backstage in that as he's such an important mind for the business. Also, the creator of the Royal Rumble. I mean, what else do I need to say? Aside from being the first ever Intercontinental Champion, he was also part of a phenomenal tag team with Ray Stevens. They were known as the Blonde Bombers. Let me try that again, folks. No, I'm not going to do that because that was just hilarious. Known as the Blonde Bombers. There we go. With Ray Stevens, of course. He was also a multiple NWA World Tag Team Champion with tons of different partners. When I was doing some research for this here, I was going to list off all the tag partners. I think I got to 6, and I was like, okay, I'm not listing all these guys off. But there was a couple names. Rocky Johnson was one who kind of stood out to me. I was like, oh, really cool. They would have some great matches together. I'll have to look some of those up later. But just name a few titles he's won as well. Obviously, he's won the NWA United States Championship. He won that 5 times. So definitely is definitely cool. I didn't actually know that he won the NWA United States Championship before I looked this up. And of course, he is a 1-time WWE Hardcore Champion during his stooge years in the company, which unfortunately a lot of people remember Pat Patterson. You bring up Pat Patterson's name to a more modern fan, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, he was that stupid old man who used to like wear dresses and fumble around with Mr. McMahon in the Attitude Era." And it kind of makes me sad that that's how people remember Pat Patterson. But you know what? I mean, whatever. I guess so long as they remember him somehow, I guess that's okay. But I always say to people who don't know, like, I'm like, go back and do some research and look up and just watch some of his matches, because he truly was great. Again, whether he was in a tag team or he was on his own, he was always amazing. But even the silly type matches he had during his last few years in the ring and in WWE there, they were even good matches. Him and Gerald Briscoe, they had that friggin' nightgown match, and I mean, it was still a funny, good match. Like, he's a great mind. Everything he did was just amazing. He's still such widely just regarded as a great wrestler, and he should be. I know when WWE did their list, I think he was in the top 10, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, it was the top 100 wrestlers voted by wrestlers. So that tells you all you need to know about Pat Patterson. The fact that I think I know he was for sure in the top 20, where he belongs. Truly an amazing wrestler. He's one of those guys. If you want to learn how to wrestle, you watch Pat Patterson. So that was Pat Patterson, number 9 on my list here. We're rolling along here. Now we're going to get into some more kind of more well-known modern guys who some of you more modern wrestling fans might know. Should know. I mean, you should know all the guys on this list. That's kind of the point I'm driving at here. Hopefully, if you are listening and there's a name you don't know that I say on this list, hopefully you will check these people out because they deserve it. I mean, who am I to sit here and say, yeah, you should check out Pat Patterson, give him a chance, he's a good kid. But that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. I know there are a couple people who listen to the podcast they're big wrestling fans, but they don't necessarily know a lot of kind of like the history of wrestling and old school wrestling and that kind of thing. So hopefully this list helps. But continuing on here, we have my number 8 pick on this list here, Bam Bam Bigelow. Don't mess with Bam Bam, the beast from the East. Truly, he was one of the great big men of the sport, and it is a crime that he is so overlooked, I think, in this day and age. During his professional wrestling career spanning 21 years, Bam Bam worked in major wrestling promotions, including the WWF, of course, the original Extreme Championship Wrestling promotion, and of course in WCW. He was recognized by his size of nearly 390 pounds. Holy crapola. And he of course had that awesome flame tattoo on his bald head. He held multiple championships in both ECW, WCW, and he had 13 total championships throughout his career. Among other accolades, he was a 1-time ECW World Heavyweight Champion and a 2-time WCW Tag Team Champion. Unfortunately, he never held the WWF title, but he headlined multiple pay-per-views when he was in the promotion, including WrestleMania X1. He was remarkably agile and fast. I mean, the one thing I always loved about Bam Bam, the first time I ever saw him work, I can't remember what match it was. I think he was just like going against an enhancement talent. They're called enhancement talents, kids, not jobbers. And I remember the guy was walking to the ring to go against Bam Bam, and Bam Bam like did a cartwheel. And I was like, what the hell? Like, that guy's like 400 pounds. He just did a cartwheel. And I mean, he was always great in the ring. You can never take that away from Bam Bam. Unfortunately, regardless of how his backstage politicking might have been or might not have been, I guess is the best way to put it. It's kind of famously known that him and Shawn Michaels always had some issues. Him and the Clique always had some issues and that kind of thing. But when it came down to as far as could he go or not, he could go. I was always drawn to him. I know a lot of it was his look. Obviously, as a fat kid, I went, oh, that guy's huge and he can like move like that and that kind of thing, and he was doing all these great moves, and he was so quick in the ring. But what really set him apart for me, probably one of the number one reasons he is on this list. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have ever seen him, Bam Bam Bigelow, the Beast from the East, hit his moonsault, the Bam Salt, you will understand why he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. It's probably one of the most devastating looking maneuvers of all time, for sure. It's got to be up there. It's probably in like my top 20 finishers of all time. But that is a list that is going to have to be made another day. Truly awesome. The first time I saw him hit it, I was just like, okay, I'm sold on this guy. Obviously, he was around in the WWE when I wasn't watching wrestling, of course. But I know my parents used to watch Raw all the time back in the day, in WWF before it was Raw. And he was someone I always would remember seeing. So I think that's one reason why it's kind of a nostalgia trip for me. But I mean, even watching some of his work in ECW, he was great. You know, the self-proclaimed Taz killer. The matches he had with Taz was amazing. One of my favorite ECW moments actually involves him and Taz, who, spoiler alert, we might hear from on this list. But maybe. Sorry, guys. I have a bad cough there. But the match with him and Taz when he slammed Taz through the floor, I think that was one of a truly, oh my God moments. Like, I can't believe that just happened. It always made me pop anytime I see that. I see it on top 10 videos and all that kind of thing. Some crazy moments in that. Always awesome. Not to mention, just any match he had with Taz was great. Any match he had in ECW was great. I think it's very tragic that he never got his WWF title run. You know, like I said, whether it was due to backstage politicking or not, I think him as the champion would have been really great. He probably wouldn't have held it for a long time, but that's not the point. I think he still should have got the chance. Sadly, he passed away in 2007, and it is an absolute travesty, as far as I'm concerned, to the wrestling business. The fact that Bam Bam Bigelow is not in the WWE Hall of Fame. Just for his work in ECW and WCW alone, he should be in there. But his work in WWF, he deserves to be in there because of that. You know, the amount of WrestleManias he main evented in that. He deserves to be in there, guys. And I think most people would agree with me on that. So hopefully they will fix this mistake. I don't know. Maybe one day if we see a WrestleMania in New Jersey or something. I don't know. Maybe we'll see that happen. But I think he deserves to be in there. Truly one of the greatest big men of all time. If you are a fan of the kind of smash mouth big man style, but like a little bit of movement and that kind of thing in your wrestling, definitely check Bam Bam Bigelow out. Check out any matches. You can't go wrong. I feel like Bam Bam Bigelow nowadays, if he debuted, he would be like one of the most over people ever just because of his style. So that was my number 8 pick, Mr. Bam Bam Bigelow. Let me know right now. You know, we're 3 people in here. Let me know what you think of my list so far. Let me know if you agree or disagree. You know, I always love to chat with you guys and that kind of thing. But moving right along with my list here, we have another guy who I think is tragically overlooked. I actually see a lot of people kind of hate on him online and that kind of thing, and talking about kind of old school wrestlers and that kind of thing. This guy seems to get a lot of weirdly undeserved hate, and I'm not sure why. Kind of even gets made fun of sometimes, I see. So I don't know what the hell's up with that. But the man I am talking about was definitely one of my first ever favorite wrestlers ever, and that is the Big Boss Man. You're doing hard time. He was one of the, like I said, he was one of the first WWF wrestlers I truly loved as a kid. First time I saw him, obviously, he was in that first ever, when he first came to WWF back in the day, he had like that like police officer's uniform. It was great. I loved that. Like I said, I think he was so underrated. Obviously, he was best known for his time in WWF, but he also worked in WCW as the Boss, the Guardian Angel, and probably best known in WCW as Big Bubba Rogers. During his appearance with the WWF, the Big Boss Man held the WWF World Tag Team Championship once, and he held the WWF Hardcore Championship 4 times. And of course, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2016, which was very deserved. It's something that kind of bothered me. And I'm probably going to go off on a little tangent here, so just bear with me, Segway City. When they announced that he was going to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame this past year, so many people were like, why? Why does the Big Boss Man deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? And I'm like, okay, first off, who the hell are you? Okay. Some idiot on the internet behind a keyboard talking shit about wrestlers. Whether or not you think they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame or not. The WWE Hall of Fame is not necessarily about people who drew for the company or people who had the most championships or people who were the most popular. That's not what it's about. It is about recognizing people who literally gave their bodies to entertain you and who put their lives on the line to entertain you every single day. And that's what the WWE Hall of Fame is about. So as far as I'm concerned, pretty much anybody who had any kind of tenure in the WWE deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, which the Big Boss Man definitely had. He had 2 great runs in WWE. Of course, I remember the Big Boss Man mainly during the Attitude Era days. Whether he was feeding Al Snow's dog to him, he was, either that or he was crashing the Big Show's father's funeral, or overall just being a dastardly heel. I loved it. And it's kind of funny thinking about it, the fact that I am not always necessarily a heel lover, but I loved the Big Boss Man. When he showed up as Mr. McMahon's bodyguard and he had like the mask on, and then he was finally revealed to actually be the Big Boss Man, Ray Stevens. He had the gimmick, he would wear like the body armor and that, and it was so great. I always loved it. Doesn't matter what he was doing, even if he was in a tag team with, I think it was Bull Buchanan. They had that short-lived tag team. Even that was great. I think one of the reasons why I loved the Big Boss Man so much, I mean, aside from the fact that, he may have not been the best talker whenever he was on the mic, but I think it was his tone of voice. Like when he read that poem to Big Show about his dad. I'm sorry to say that your dad finally croaked. It was like, I was like, damn, this guy is ruthless. And that's why it was great. All the stuff he was doing to the Big Show during that feud, he was getting death threats and stuff. It was working great, but I loved his style in the ring as far as it was just hard hitting, kind of smash mouth style, nothing pretty, and you didn't need anything pretty. During the early years of when I started watching wrestling and loved wrestling, it was that kind of a style that I truly loved. Like slams and spine busters and big huge power moves and that kind of thing, and brawling and that kind of thing. That's what I really truly loved. Obviously I still love that. Obviously I do prefer a little more technical wrestling nowadays. But one thing that I always loved about the Big Boss Man, aside from just his style, was his finishing maneuver, the Boss Man Slam. It's still one of my favorite finishes to this day, especially when he would get the full spin on it. It's basically just like a swinging side slam. So it's nothing pretty, but whenever he would get the full swing on it, like if he got a guy who was really coming at him full speed, and he'd lift him and they'd get the full swing, it looked friggin' devastating every time he hit it. It was always one of my favorite moves. I also absolutely loved his Attitude Era theme, as well as his original WWF theme. Obviously, are you doing hard time? But that friggin' theme he had in the Attitude Era, it's still one of my favorite themes to this day. I actually, funny quick story. Back in the day, the first ever wrestling game I ever played, it was WWF WrestleMania 2000. And my music would either always be the Hardy Boys or it would be Big Boss Man's. Same with WF No Mercy. Anytime when I created my first initial character, it was more WF No Mercy. That was like when I was really into wrestling. My first character I created, he always had the Big Boss Man's theme because I loved that friggin' theme to death. But regardless if he was working as a singles guy, if he was in a tag team working on his own, whatever he was doing, he was part of the corporation, the corporate ministry, whatever he was doing, it was always great. The hanging of the Big Boss Man is still one of those segments where like they don't show it anymore just for obvious reasons, but that was insane. I remember just like going, can they show that? He's dead. Truly, truly amazing. I still laugh about that to this day. Anytime I see it in a clip or whatever, because he's dead. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, obviously looking back now too, obviously they will not play anymore because unfortunately he did pass away in 2004. But either way, as far as heels are concerned, I still think he's truly underrated. And I mean, who doesn't love watching baby faces being beat the crap out of with a nightstick? Like, folks, if you want to watch a heel beat down a babyface, watch the Big Boss Man beat up anybody with a nightstick. And that's pretty much what you're going to get. All right, so rolling right along here, we have my number 6 pick. Now, this is definitely a controversial pick for the Harder Show, ladies and gentlemen. But I would be doing a disservice to TJ from like 10 years ago if I did not include this wrestler on this list. Regardless, and I stress this again, folks, regardless of what he did, how his life ended, and the legacy that now lives in this wrestler's name, he still was one of the greatest, and that will never be taken away from him, one of the greatest in-ring performers and technical wrestlers we've ever seen. Of course, if you haven't figured it out by now, the person I am talking about, once again, the controversial pick on my list here, the crippler, Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit probably would have been my number 3 or 2 spot, if not for the obvious. I wasn't going to include him on this list because I have very mixed feelings, obviously, about Chris Benoit. I mean, holy crap, do I really need to talk about the elephant in the room, the fact that he's on this list and he committed a double murder of his wife and child and killed himself. I mean, that's brutal. That is something that I will personally never get over because I at the time of the incident, Chris Benoit was my favorite wrestler. And the fact that it happened, regardless of what happened, folks, we will never truly know what happened. Was it drugs? Was it roid rage? Was it a mixture of the two? Was it, all the blows to his head? Was it a mixture of just a whole bunch of different things? Did Chris Benoit just finally lose it? Did he just finally snap? There are no excuses to be made for what happened. I think Chris Benoit is a horrible human being for what he did. But the Chris Benoit I know and I remember is obviously the Chris Benoit that I watched in the ring and I loved watching in the ring. And that was the technical mastery, regardless of what he was doing. Obviously, kind of during the Attitude Era, he was around, he was doing his thing, but he kind of rose more to prominence in the Ruthless Aggression Era. Obviously being a former world champion, obviously a former Intercontinental champion, multiple time tag team champion, of course, as well. Just everything he did was great. Regardless of what he was doing, he always had amazing matches with anybody. Obviously, his style was his own. All of his friggin' German suplexes, the hat trick. I always loved whenever he'd hit the hat trick, those triple German suplexes. He would do the three amigo after Eddie passed away as a tribute to him. Chris Benoit was not a great talker, and he didn't need to be. He would just come out to the ring, no BS, and he'd whip your ass. Obviously, during his time in Japan as well, he was incredible. During his time in ECW as literally the crippler Chris Benoit for the incident in which Savvy broke his neck during a match with him. And they turned that into an angle, of course, because ECW, folks. He was always great. WCW, he was great as well. But he was a man who he held his passion for the wrestling business over anything else. Leaving WCW because he was sick of all the BS. Even though they offered him the title, he still didn't want it. He wanted to leave that badly to just wrestle. Coming in as part of the Radicals, of course, with Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn. I have a feeling you might see one or two of those people on the list later. Sorry. He was always great. I'm kind of... it's hard to talk about Chris Benoit because, like I said, at the time of when the incident, we'll call it, happened, he was my favorite wrestler. I loved Chris Benoit. So I have a really hard time talking about Chris Benoit because, I can't fully, I can say I hate the guy as far as what he did in his own personal life, but as far as Chris Benoit, the wrestler, the wrestling character, quote unquote, I love and I cannot hate that guy. One of the coolest matches I saw him do that came into mind was actually kind of a random match that didn't really mean anything. It was just kind of a random feud he had with A-Train, actually. It was at No Mercy 2003, I believe. The one where Vince McMahon choked Stephanie out with a steel pipe, whatever. And it had this great ending. I love the match because A-Train was kind of beating the crap out of Chris, and Chris was, of course, doing what Chris did, which was, selling like crazy, and he would, he wasn't giving up, and that was why, another reason why I love Chris Benoit so much. And near the end of the match, A-Train, of course, he wants to put Benoit away, so he needs to go that extra mile and be a big dastardly heel, so he goes out and gets a chair. And he puts it in between the turnbuckle and the ring ropes there. And he goes to go throw Chris into it head first. And Chris kind of stops and he's kind of sitting up against the chair. And Albert goes to run and give him like an avalanche in the corner. And Chris gets out of the way and his A-Train's leg goes through it. And then, of course, he comes at Chris again. Hook of the leg. Over under. Puts him in a sharpshooter. And I think it was Taz yelling, "Sharpshooter, sharpshooter!" And as he taps. It was just, I don't know why, I always remember that because it was just such a great ending to that match. It was a great story. And that's why I love Chris Benoit. He never had a bad match. The moment that him and Eddie Guerrero had in the ring when they were both champion was a beautiful, amazing moment between friends. I get teared up every single time I think about or see or someone talks about Chris Benoit just openly weeping when Eddie passed away and when they had him on TV and that. And I mean, that sucks. That really sucks. Thinking back, obviously I was watching wrestling heavily at that point. I was obsessed, and having Chris talk about Eddie the way he did in that, and it was brutal, and you could really see just how much that affected him. But that's kind of all I have to say about Chris Benoit. Does Chris Benoit deserve to be in the WWE Hall of Fame? I don't think so, because of what he did outside of the ring. As far as his in-ring career, abso-freaking-lutely. Something funny I used to, well, not funny, but something crazy I used to think. I would always make this argument whenever I would talk to my buddies about it. I would say, oh, well, they don't have to induct him as Chris Benoit. They could induct him as, like, when he was under a mask as the Pegasus Kid, when he took over that moniker. You know, just induct the Pegasus Kid, because there's multiple people who played the Pegasus Kid. And then that way, like, he's still kind of in there. But, like, looking back, I'm like, why would I think that was a good idea? Like, people would just be like, who? Like, what? The Pegasus Kid? You'd have all these, like, random cats, and all of a sudden, Chris Benoit, his name would have to be in there, but they'd, like, have it blacked out. It's stupid. It wouldn't work. But I guess in my small mind, I thought that was a good idea. But either way, I do have some people who have asked me before what I think about the Chris Benoit being in the Hall of Fame debate. And I think Stone Cold said it best. One time when he was asked about it, he just said, you know what? Chris Benoit, great in-ring worker, you know, was always a nice guy anytime that Steve talked to him. But he said, for what he did outside of the ring, he can never and will never be in the Hall of Fame. He just can't. It would probably end the WWE if they inducted him in the Hall of Fame. Regardless of time, time is not going to heal that wound in the eyes of society. And time just isn't going to heal that wound. That is a disgusting and tragic and brutal thing that happened that he did. So that's that. I'm going to get off it here because I'll talk about that for another 20 minutes probably. But that was my number 6 pick, Mr. Chris Benoit. Definitely a controversial pick. All right, guys, just want to take a quick second here to give a big shout out to the first ever sponsor and big time supporter of the Harder Show, my man, Mr. Jason Reese over at Jaybird Digital Arts. Now, what exactly does Jason do? Well, if you guys need any kind of logos, t-shirts, posters, album design, tickets, photo manipulation, you guys still with me? Advertising, business stationery, mailers, brochures, fine art, and literally anything else you can think of, Jaybird Digital Arts can create it. No project is just a generic template, and every single job is a new opportunity to create something unique. Jason's done all the Harder Show logos, t-shirts, banners, and even a meme here and there, so I can promise you that you will love and be inspired by what Jason comes up with. You can find him on the web at www.jaybird, that's Jaybird, digitalarts.com. Or you can find him on Facebook under the Jaybird Digital Arts handle, as well as on Instagram. If you happen to use his services, be sure to let him know that TJ sent you. Alright, so rolling right along with my list here, we have a man who definitely should be recognized as one of the greatest of all time. And that, my number 5 pick, is Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig. Do I really need to talk about why? Like, do I really need to sit here and give you guys reasons as to why he is number 5 on my list? Shit, alright. So, Curt Hennig, he was a 4-time world champion, having held the AWA World Heavyweight Championship once for 373 days. That is the 7th longest reign in history. Among other championships, his best known title reign was the fact that he was a 2-time WWF Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion. Hennig has been named by WWE as one of the top 5 Intercontinental Champions of all time, and was a man who brought a new level of credibility to the title. And he was the longest reigning champion of the 1990s, which is pretty sweet, pretty damn impressive. In addition to winning multiple championships in WCW as well in the late 1990s, he was also a member of the NWO, of course. He returned to the WWF for a brief period in 2002, where he was one of the last 3 men in the Royal Rumble of that year. He had a nice little run there for a little bit. Later challenged for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in TNA prior to his death on February 10th, 2003. I go a little more in depth with this one here. Both WWF and WCW have recognized Hennig as one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time, with them recognizing him in 2007 by inducting him into the WWE Hall of Fame. Of course, he was inducted by his longtime friend and MLB player and Mr. Wade Boggs. And he just was always widely regarded as one of the greatest technical wrestlers who ever lived, and he raised the bar so very high. Former WWF rival Hulk Hogan, I thought this was a really cool quote, so I wanted to include it. He remarked once, everybody would check their egos at the door when they came into a building that Curt Hennig was in, because you couldn't outwork him, you couldn't outshine him, and you couldn't outperform him. He was the best of the best. So personally, I loved Mr. Perfect because of his technical wrestling prowess. Do I really need to say more? I mean, he could also talk, which is something a lot of people like to forget, because he had Bobby Heenan, who was, if not one of the greatest mouthpiece of all times. But he could talk, even on commentary. I remember Curt Hennig obviously mostly at the end of his WWF run the first time, and when he was there the second time. So I do remember him being on commentary. And I remember the one thing where the camera was on him and he flipped his pencil up in the air and he caught it. And he just smirked at the camera. And I was, how do you do that on live television? Like, what the hell? You know, he'd spit his gum up in the air and hit it with his hand. You'd never see him miss it or anything, because that wouldn't be perfect. I'm pretty sure I stole that quote from Wade Boggs, but whatever. Watching his matches was just like watching a clinic of wrestling, and it was always great, no matter who he was in there with. And of course, he would end every single match off with another finish that I love, the Perfect Plex. Not a fisherman suplex. This is for the heel Ryan Wood. It is not a fisherman suplex, because a fisherman suplex does not have that quite the same bend that the Perfect Plex had, because the Perfect Plex was its own maneuver. But definitely one of the all-time greatest. I don't think I've ever seen a match with Curt Hennig that I thought was a bad match. Definitely incredible. He had some amazing matches with Bret Hart. If you're going to watch a Curt Hennig match if you've never seen him work before, I highly recommend watching anything he did with Bret Hart. When he dropped the belt to him, right before Curt Hennig left to deal with some nagging injuries. Obviously, that probably wasn't the greatest match he did with Bret Hart, but it was still a great match. He's still widely regarded, even nowadays, as just one of the all-time greats, and I think it's an absolute tragedy that he never got his run on top. I feel that he really should have, because, guys, that simply would have been perfect. And that's just where I need to end off that number 4 there. I couldn't have written a better joke if I tried, folks. But rolling right along here, keeping up on number 4, we have probably the most popular name I have on my list here. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone, if you don't for some friggin' reason, you're damn well about to know him. That is Eddie Guerrero. Viva la raza! Do I really seriously need to talk about Eddie? He's a former WWE champion, former light heavyweight champion, former Intercontinental champion, former European champion, former tag team champion, former United States champion, former ECW television champion. What more I need to say? And he won a shitload of titles as well. But it didn't matter what he did, whether he was Latino Heat, he was lying, cheating, and stealing, or he was the admittedly awkward and dark I'm Your Poppy heel run. He was always incredible, guys. You know, I most remember Eddie during the lie, cheat, and steal days, with on his own, and then with Los Guerreros, and then of course the I'm Your Poppy thing. I remember that little angle, him saying that he was Ray's son Dominic's father, and that sucked. That was awkward and weird and dark, and it didn't make any sense. But I loved heel Eddie. They changed his music so it was like darker and that. And it was really cool. I really dug it. But the lie, cheat, and steal Eddie was everyone's favorite when he won the championship, and when he was kind of I guess in a way carrying the company on his back, and he did an amazing job with Eddie Guerrero. I mean, from a technical wrestling standpoint, there's not a lot of guys who can touch Eddie. He's up there with any of the greats. He is the greats as far as I'm concerned. But also on top of that, His aerial maneuvers were great. I mean, obviously his finish was the frog splash. It was amazing. I love the frog splash. When I had a trampoline back in the day, that was my go-to move when I would hit. If I was wrestling with my buddies on my trampoline, I would usually go for a frog splash. Very dangerously, admittedly, because I probably could have broken my back or something. Whatever, that's beside the point. I think the thing I loved about Eddie, aside from the fact that, talking about his technical prowess and that, he was trained from the moment he could walk. So, I mean, this guy knew what he was doing. He was in a wrestling family. He always knew what he was doing. It always showed. He could wrestle the, quote-unquote cruiserweight style, or he could wrestle as a big man, and you would believe it. And that's one reason why I loved Eddie so much. His matches in the Ruthless Aggression era were some of my absolute favorites. The match he had against Brock Lesnar when he won the title for the first time, I think had a great story. The fact that he won that match, I think, is amazing. He was a brutally passionate performer, and you always felt everything he did. It was just real, and it meant something. When Eddie would sell, you would feel it. It was just real. His run with Chavo as Los Guerreros was amazing. I loved them working together. But I am very glad that he got his WWE title run. It makes me sad that he never got his other run, that he was basically famously reportedly going to get another run before he passed away. He was going to beat Batista for the title. Tragically, he passed away in 2005, and it still kills me to this day, because I remember I was sitting in my living room, and I think it was my mom. She said, "Hey, she's like, Eddie Guerrero." I'm like, "Yeah." He died. Like, I remember, I had tears in my eyes. It was so, oh my God. A lot of people like to say, and this kind of bothers me, that Eddie is as well remembered and is kind of highly thought of because he passed away. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think in the eyes of a lot of casual viewers, maybe. I know Chavo said something like that once on a podcast. He said, when Eddie was around, people used to talk crap about him. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think a lot of his real fan base and the hardcore fan base loved and respected Eddie so much that he could do no wrong. He was so entertaining. I mean, you look at his last match against friggin' Mr. Kennedy. And, he did his classic Eddie thing where he'd grab the chair, the ref was down, he'd grab the chair and he'd hit it off the ring, and then he'd lay on the ground and throw it at the other guy. So it looked like they hit him with a chair and he'd win the match. That's just amazing. Absolutely incredible. I remember watching that match too, live. I remember watching it on SmackDown. Well, not live on SmackDown, you know what I mean. And it was just amazing. I love it. I do get emotional when I talk about Eddie, because it sucks ass. Obviously, of course, also what happened with Chris Benoit. Kind of that whole thing kind of tied together, I guess, in a way. It just sucks. But either way, Eddie is one of the greatest of all time, hands down, no questions asked. And he will never, ever, ever be forgotten. All right, but moving right along here, we have my number 3 pick. We're getting there, folks. We're getting there. He is a man who definitely does not need an introduction. Again, some more modern, very modern fans, they'll probably know his name, but then may not know a lot about him. So that's one reason why I really wanted to make sure I include him on this list, and also because he's just one of my favorites of all time. And that man is Taz. Survive if I let you. I mean, Taz he was the killer for ECW, man. And he's definitely best known as his tenure in ECW. He was a 2-time World Heavyweight Champion there. He was a 2-time World Television Champion, a 3-time World Tag Team Champion, and a 2-time, and of course, the first FTW World Heavyweight Champion, which if you guys don't know the story about that or anything, you can go back and check it out. Basically, it was Taz's title. And of course, he was the 4th ever ECW Triple Crown Champion. He took everybody out. I mean, anytime Taz had a match with somebody, he'd take him out. He'd choke him out. It was what he did. His matches were always brutal, but they were technical. And that's why I love them so much. That's why I love Taz. Even his promos, like he's kind of a lot of people don't like to talk about his promos when he was in ECW, but there was the one thing I remember when he was talking with Kurt Angle. And he was just like, you're a great amateur. Well, I'm a great professional. And like he'd talk about FTW life and all this shit. And it was just great. Like I always liked his promos. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but the human suplex machine, I think that's probably why I love Taz so much. Like I said, just he was so crisp. He would hit suplexes on anybody, a belly to belly. Doesn't matter what it was. He'd hit them on anyone at any time, and it was so crisp and clean. But the number one reason I think why I love Taz so much, why he's one of my, even taking into account active wrestlers right now, Taz is still definitely in my list of my top 10. And that is the fact that it's his finish. If you don't know what Taz's finish is, it is the Taz Mission, a maneuver that I literally mimic on everybody I possibly can, usually the heel Ryan would. Basically, it's a half Nelson choke with a grapevine. If you don't know what that is, just go on YouTube right now and look up the Taz Mission. It'll pop right up. I'm not going to get all technical here, folks, but that's that maneuver. I have hit that maneuver on so many different people. I can't even count. But usually it's the heel Ryan Wood is usually who I hit the maneuver on anytime we get drinking. Usually there's some wrestling that goes on, and I usually hit that friggin' move on him. But I loved watching him choke people out. It doesn't matter who it was, whether he was playing a heel, he was playing a face, whatever it was. His debut match against Kurt Angle was great. I just think it sucks that they kind of took that losing streak, him beating Kurt Angle and his winning streak away from him. I think that was kind of lame. His match against Triple H was great as well during the Alliance era. The whole Invasion Alliance angle, and that's kind of viewed as kind of lame. And I guess his roles in it are kind of forgotten sometimes, but I think that was a great match. I really do. Regardless of who should have won, I think Taz should have won, but I'm not here to fantasy book today, guys, and pull a what culture and tell them how they should have booked it and so forth. But due to nagging injuries, Taz had to retire from full-time competition. He kind of had some brief stuff there. Him and Spike Dudley randomly formed a tag team and held the titles for a little bit. They were a pretty decent little tag team. He had a little feud with Jerry Lawler in which he was, Thug Life, and he was beating the crap out of Jerry Lawler, and he hit, he was beating up JR and stuff, and it was great. I love that match. I love how Taz was choking him out, and then JR came with the jar and he smacked him with it. It was great. It was great. But the final match that Taz had, I love this. I love this, and I'm going to tell you why. The final match that Taz had to date was at ECW One Night Stand 2006, and the year before, we did see Taz, but he was just at the big brawl at the end. He came out and was taking names. But this, what was great about it was, obviously Taz was not in ring shape. He was not going to wrestle a full match. I knew that going into it. I know he had some nagging injuries and that kind of thing, so I was like, Taz isn't going to be able to wrestle. He's wrestling Jerry Lawler, and same thing. Jerry Lawler can still go, but how is this going to work? And of course, walking to the ring, King's playing the heel, of course, extremely crappy wrestling and all that leading up to it. So you wanted to see Jerry just get his ass kicked, right? You wanted to see it. As much as I love Jerry Lawler and respect him so much in that, I wanted to see him get choked out. Of course I did, and he walks into the ring, he smacks Joey Styles, and he gets in the ring with Taz, and Taz is like, come on, and then friggin' Joey Styles jumps on him and puts him in a chokehold. And King reverses it, obviously, and right when he's about to pile drive him, friggin' Taz locks him in a Taz mission and chokes him out. And it's just great. I love it. I love that was his, final kind of swan song, I guess, because of all the beef Jerry Lawler had with ECW back in the day. I think it was good to finally see his guys come up, and even though it wasn't much of a match, but I think that's the point. to me, Taz actually is also kind of one of the voices of the WWE. He's very overlooked for that. The time that I was obsessed with wrestling, he was one of the SmackDown commentators. He was the color commentator, along with Michael Cole, obviously. And I loved him in that role, guys. I don't know. Everyone always talks crap about that era of SmackDown's commentator, and I don't know why. Because he always did a good job. He was great. I loved listening to him talk. Because, again, he knew what he was talking about. Not to mention, I loved his podcast, The Human Podcast Machine. And, of course, The Taz Show, which is not a podcast, folks, is amazing. So I guess just inside and outside of the ring, I just love Taz. I love everything he does. And I know the producer, Brandon Bowden, loves him as well. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go play his theme song on like a 3-hour loop. But that was my number 3 pick, guys. So we're heading up here. We're at number 2. We're kind of getting ready to... We're at third base here, folks. Bottom of the night. We have my number 2 pick, who is a man who definitely, with 100% certainty, will not need any introduction. And that is the hardcore legend, Mick Foley. Bang, bang! He's a true icon in this business, and he's widely regarded as one of the greatest of all time. He's right up there with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe I'm crazy to think that. You've got guys like them, Undertaker, and all those guys. I think Mick deserves to be up there with them. It doesn't matter if he was, whether he was the mental Cactus Jack, he was the deranged Mankind, or he was the fun-loving Dude Love. He was always, always great. Mick Foley, of course, is a 4-time world champion, time WWF champion. He was also, of course, included in that 4 world championship reigns, was a TNA World Heavyweight Championship reign. He was an 11-time world tag team champion, 8-time WWF tag team champion, 2-time ECW world tag team champion, and, of course, a 1-time WCW world tag team champion. Holy crap. And, of course, he was a 1-time TNA Legends champion, and last but not least, he was the inaugural WWF Hardcore Champion. He's obviously, of course, had many different roles on screen in the company. He was obviously, right now, he's the co-general manager of Raw, and he's doing a good job at that. Even though people like to talk crap about him, whatever, people need to get their lives together. His time as the commissioner was amazing. I loved it. I laughed every single time. He was great. Anytime his music hits, I get a huge smile on my face. It doesn't matter. Even something somewhat recently he did. I always loved Mick's promos. I think that's one reason why I love Mick so much. Aside from the fact that he, I think, is another kind of big man, so to speak, that no one really gives a lot of credit to. They don't really look past his... They don't look past his hardcore matches and his death matches and that crazy Hell in the Cell dive spot, and I'm not going to talk about that. Do I really need to? He was always great in the ring, and his promos, regardless of if he was playing Cactus Jack or he was Dude Love or he was Mankind, doesn't matter. He always cut a great promo. One of my favorite things he did recently, actually, well, somewhat recently, was when Dean and Seth were going to have that Hell in the Cell match, and he just randomly came out of nowhere. I popped hard, and he's talking about, in any scenario, he sees Seth Rollins coming out on top, but this is no ordinary scenario. And it's just like, I can't remember the exact what he said in the promo, but he's just like, they say that doesn't kill you, makes you stronger. But with all due respect to the German philosopher, whatever, he was never thrown off a cell. And like, it's just this moment, you see Dean Ambrose in the background just like smiling from ear to ear. He was loving it, and I was too. I loved it. He's definitely the wrestler I mimic the most in my everyday life, whether it's saying bang bang randomly for no apparent fucking reason, or me giving someone a double arm DDT, usually the heel Ryan would, or I'm mimicking his promo voice when he was Cactus Jack. I like to do that a lot. I just have a huge soft spot for him. His time in WWF was great. WWE was great. His time in WCW and ECW were as well. He was definitely part of my favorite hardcore match of all time, which was at WrestleMania 22 with him versus Edge. And of course, he had a great heel run with Edge after that. His matches with Terry Funk were always incredible. And actually, one of my favorite matches, like on a Raw, was Triple H versus Cactus Jack. And that cool street fight match. Really cool. It was a match but the match that really, I think, sold me on Mick Foley was the I Quit match he had against The Rock. Brutal, probably one of the most brutal matches of all time. But it was the heart he showed, his determination, and just the balls to take that many chair shots. Like, damn. Unfortunately, he is living proof that too many chair shots can hurt you. He talks about it all the time, how he's kind of, loopy and stuff some days and that kind of thing. He is no longer medically cleared to wrestle due to nagging injuries, so that does suck. Obviously, hopefully his health doesn't get to be too much of an issue in the future. Whatever role he's in is great. It doesn't matter. I'm just happy to see Mick Foley still in the company doing stuff. But the match he could have had with Dean Ambrose would have been amazing. So that was my number 2 pick, guys, Mr. Mick Foley. We've had a great list so far, I think, anyway. Definitely some awesome picks. I'm going to do a quick recap here, then we're going to end off with a bang with my number 1 pick. So number 10, we had the Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers. Number 9, we had Pat Patterson. Number 8, we had Bam Bam Bigelow. Number 7, we had the Big Boss Man. Number 6, we have Chris Benoit. Number 5, we have Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. Number 4, we had Eddie Guerrero. Number 3, we had Taz. Number 2, of course, we had Mick Foley. And number 1, my number 1 favorite wrestler who is either retired from entering competition or who unfortunately has passed away, the Iceman, Dean Malenko, the man of 1,000 holds. He is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. Again, taking into account even guys who are still active in the company, he's definitely in my top 5. Regardless of where he was working, he was amazing. If you guys, for some reason, have never heard of Dean Malenko, you need to go look up his matches because he was just incredible. His technical wrestling ability was just, it was bar none. He was amazing. Although he never won a world champion, he did achieve success in ECW, WCW, and WWF, winning a total of 11 titles between the 3 organizations. Pro Wrestling Illustrated named Malenko the number 1 wrestler in the world in 1997, and at that point there was some pretty tough competition. He was also inducted into the Hardcore Hall of Fame in 2015. Daniel Bryan actually he had a quick little quote I thought was pretty cool. He just said, number 1 guy growing up was Dean Malenko. And for someone like Daniel Bryan to say that about Dean Malenko, I mean, that should tell you all you need to know. His time in WWE as an in-ring talent, of course, it was during the Attitude Era. So gimmicks and silly storylines and that kind of thing kind of ruled at that point. So didn't really get to see a whole lot of his real ability. I mean, any match he had was always great. He had that gimmick where he was like the James Bond-esque character, whatever the hell it was. They had the thing with Lita and that, and I mean, it was still cool. I think he played that role good, but I think they could have done so much more with him. He still had 2 great light heavyweight championship reigns. To this day, I will sit down and watch Dean Malenko work anybody. It doesn't matter who. I always enjoy it. Obviously, his best work was in ECW and WCW against the likes of Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, and of course, Chris Benoit. Another reason why I love Dean so much, aside from the fact that he had, all of his amazing holds and suplexes and all that kind of thing, the man of 1,000 holds, not to be mistaken with the man of 1,001 holds, Mr. Chris Jericho, another guy he had amazing matches with, but also not to mention the fact that he had amazing crossbodies. Yes, amazing crossbodies. It's a solid maneuver, folks. 2 moves in particular he used to do. Number 1 was his top rope rib breaker. That used to make me just I would be like, I thought it was one of the most devastating moves I've ever seen in my life, and that wasn't even his finish. And then of course he'd usually finish guys off with the Texas Cloverleaf, one of my favorite submissions of all time. He still works for the company as a road agent, so it's awesome the fact that he is still around and helping teach guys and that kind of thing. I think is really cool. Personally, I think he deserves to be in the WWE Hall of Fame because he's not in it right now. I would love to see him go in while he's still working for the company and is still around and that kind of thing, obviously. Just for his work in ECW and WCW alone, he deserves to be in there. But definitely taking into account also the little run he had in WWF and what he does for the company now, I think he deserves to be in there. He is truly one of the greatest, as far as I'm concerned, regardless of his size and the career he had. You know, again, people say, oh, well, he was never a big draw or anything like that. He wasn't a top guy. He wasn't a world champion. It doesn't matter. He was an amazing talent. He was great in the ring. And you ask a lot of guys about Dean Malenko, and if they know who he is, they'll agree with me. So that's that. You want to learn how to wrestle, folks? Watch Dean Malenko, in my opinion. That's all you need to know. So, yeah, that's my list, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you agreed with me on some names, maybe. Let me know your list. Let me know your list of top 10 wrestlers who have either retired from your own competition or who are unfortunately no longer with us. Definitely let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. Love to hear from your guys' list. Thank you so much for tuning in today, regardless of how you were listening. If you were listening on the SoundCloud, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this podcast and let me know what you thought of it by leaving a comment. Of course, like I said, I always love to hear from you guys. If you are listening on the YouTube, be sure to leave a like or dislike on this video, depending on what you thought of it. And of course, comment your life away. And absolutely last but not least, guys, if you are listening on the iTunes, which you guys know is the easiest way to listen to The Harder Show, be sure to leave a rating and a comment. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, all that fun stuff. Once you subscribe to The Harder Show, folks, on iTunes, you don't even have to think about it. Every time a new episode is uploaded, it will be downloaded immediately to the device of your choosing. So, who doesn't like that? Simple, guys. You don't even have to think about it. So that's going to do it for me here today, guys. I actually have to get running to work, so I'm going to make this outro short and sweet. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast today. Again, please be sure to comment and let me know what your top 10 list is. I would love to hear from you guys. You can always hit me up in any of the social medias or all that kind of fun stuff. And I will catch you guys next time on The Harder Show. Take it easy.